Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak and Rivkah speaking to you from south of Jerusalem, here in the Holy Land of Israel. Today is the 24th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, 5784. It's November 7th, 2023. This coming Shabbat, we'll be reading Parshat Chayei Sara, the life of Sarah, from the book of Genesis, beginning chapter 23, verse 1, concluding chapter 25, verse 18. This coming Shabbat is also Shabbat Mavarachin. That is the Shabbat that precedes Rosh Chodesh, the new month. And it's called Mavarachin because we say a special blessing and anticipation of the upcoming month. And the upcoming month is the month of Kislev. And that will begin, Rosh Chodesh will be on Monday night, next Monday night, and Tuesday. Kislev, of course, is the month of the festival of Hanukkah, festival of the Maccabees, otherwise known as the Hashmonaim, who rebelled against the Greek occupiers and the Hellenizers, and regained sovereignty for the people of Israel in the land of Israel, regained control over Jerusalem, and regained the Holy Temple, retook the Holy Temple, liberated it, purified it, and rededicated it, and renewed the Tamid, the daily offering in the Holy Temple. And of course that's what Hanukkah is all about. That is still over a month away. This coming Sunday evening, Monday, is the holiday of Sigd, a holiday that's been a major holiday of Ethiopian Jewry for many, many hundreds of years. And with the mass aliyah, the mass repatriation, is that what you call it, of Ethiopian Jews in Israel in these past decades, the holiday of Sigd has become a major holiday here in Israel. It is on the 29th day of the month of Cheshvan, the final day of the month of Cheshvan. It's actually exactly 50 days after Yom Kippur, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. And of course, we're also going to be talking about the war, Israel's war against Gaza. It's become we have basically a weekly update here on Temple Talk, because it is super important and it is super relevant to everything that Temple Talk is about, and everything that the Temple Institute's about, because it has to do with Israel's nation, our independence, our sovereignty, our safety, our peace. And all that, of course, is intricately tied in with the Holy Temple, which ultimately one day will be the crowning glory of the nation of Israel and a blessing for all the nations of the world. And right now, Israel is fighting for our people, for our men, women, children, our elderly, our youth, fighting for our honor, fighting for our dignity, fighting for our lives, fighting for our land. The entire nation has been called up in one way or another. 300,000 soldiers have been called up, which is a phenomenal number of soldiers in a nation of about 9 million people, I think. And those that haven't been called up for combat are taking part in the entire effort with all sorts of support and all sorts of physical support, medical support, emotional support, spiritual support, everything you can think of and beyond for this effort. And I called this the War of Israel against Gaza because too many people, especially world leaders, like let's say Joe Biden, President of the United States, keep saying that Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinians. Don't make a mistake, they say. Palestinians are innocent. They're okay. It's Hamas. They're the problem. Well, Hamas does represent the Palestinians, and I'll tell you how I know that, because even today, Poles give the Palestinian Poles give Hamas tremendous support, more support than the PLO of the Palestinian Authority, which always comes in a very weak second. And with every terror attack perpetrated by Hamas, their numbers go up in the polls. They were voted into office some 16 years ago, and they've haven't bothered to have a second vote because they took over in Gaza and in the West Bank, that is Judea and Samaria. Their polls always greatly outnumber. Their support greatly outnumbers that of the Palestinian Authority, which is why the Palestinian Authority hasn't had elections in about 18 years, because they know if they would have a resounding loss. And the only reason that the Palestinian Authority still has any authority is because Israel protects them from Hamas, because in the very insane situation that we have here in Israel, the Palestinian Authority, which supports terror, which pays for terrorists, and which incites against Israel night and day, and teaches its people from age 0 to hate and kill Jews, they are still, in the eyes of Israel, the lesser threat, only because Hamas is more aggressive and more and has the full support of Iran in their efforts to eliminate the Jewish state and eliminate the Jewish people. So, but yes, the Palestinians do support Hamas. They do support terror. And those of Gaza were thousands of Gazans, non-Hamas members, non-Hamas terrorists, entered with the terrorists on October 7th and took part in their festival of gore and blood and inhuman, bestial behavior. And when Israeli hostages were taken into Gaza, they were cheering and throwing candy and beating the Israeli hostages. Even dead bodies of Israeli hostages they were beating. They definitely support Hamas. Now they're in a bit of a bind because Hamas basically doesn't give a damn about their lives, and Hamas is busy trying to put them in between the Israeli army and the Hamas terrorists so that these Gazans will be killed, and then it's great PR for Hamas, because then they can say that Israel is killing innocent people, and wow, the West just loves to eat that up. They just love that. They love when they can point a finger at Israel and say they're just bad. You know, or Barack Obama, Israel's just as bad as Hamas, he basically said in his latest hate-filled anti-Semitic speech, in which he said, like bad things happened on October 7th. I mean, that's a big statement for Barack Obama. Bad things happened, but, Israel kind of had it coming because of the horrible things they've been doing to Palestinians for the past, 5 zillion years, I guess, because that's Barack Obama. That's who he is. Hates Jews, hates Israel, and even this barbaric attack on October 7th doesn't shake him. He's too smart. He's too intellectual. He knows the difference between right and wrong, and cutting off babies' heads and mutilating children in front of their parents and parents in front of their children, etc., etc., etc. I don't need to go over it again. That doesn't bother him. He knows better. That's just a reasonable response to horrible oppression. I want to tell you, Israel has not had, until Israel returned to Gaza 3 weeks ago, Israel has not had a single soul inside of Gaza other than 2 Israeli citizens which have been held hostage by Hamas for a number of years, and a couple of Israeli soldiers' bodies who have been held hostage by Hamas for a number of years. So, occupation, give me a break. So right now, Israel's army is in Gaza. Our planes are still going over Gaza. We've been hitting thousands and thousands of targets. They're all over the place because Hamas has embedded itself in residential buildings, in mosques. Just yesterday, Israel went into a mosque that it had liberated from Hamas and found rocket launchers and 50 rockets there, embedded themselves in children's playgrounds, schools, hospitals, of course. Wherever people are supposed to be able to live, that's where Hamas has embedded its terror infrastructure. And of course, the Hamas leaders and top brass are all underground, like the rats, the rodents that they are. And their main headquarters are under the largest hospital in Gaza, the Shifa hospital in Gaza City. And Israel has now encircled and basically laid siege on Gaza City and is pursuing these terrorists. Israel has developed all sorts of methods to get into the tunnels and to destroy the tunnels and the terrorists inside the tunnels. And of course, Israel also has bunker bombs. What do we say? Courtesy of the United States, which has sent bunker bombs over recently, and there have been some reports that Israel is already using them. Israel has certainly destroyed a number of tunnels from the air, so maybe there were bunker bombs they were using. And in the meantime, 240 plus Israeli hostages are still being held in Gaza. No one's heard a word from them. The Red Cross, the International Red Cross, whose main responsibility in a situation like this is the safety and well-being of those hostages, hasn't even bothered to discuss it with Hamas, let alone insist that they need to see them. As far as they're concerned, it doesn't matter. They keep lecturing Israel on humanitarian concern for the Gazans. Now, Israel has not only gave warnings for 3 weeks for Gazans in the north of Gaza, where Israel entered first, to move south. Israel has opened up passages so that they can move south, and Israel is actually preventing Hamas from killing Gazans moving south, because Hamas doesn't want them to move south, because they want them to be killed by the Israelis. And so Israel, you got to hand it to Israel. We are humanitarians, and we are protecting the lives of Gazans from Hamas as they head south into the southern end of Gaza, where they're not going to be able to stay for long, because Israel also needs to get into southern Gaza. And at some point, I would imagine that Egypt's going to have to open their border and let these people move across. Nobody wants them. The Arab world doesn't give a damn about the Palestinians. They're just a good PR tool to use in the West for their war against Israel. And not only that, every country that the Palestinians have been and their Palestinians and their terrorist leadership have been forced into, they've tried to destroy. It happened in Jordan in 1970. It happened in Beirut in the 1980s. It happened in Kuwait when some 200,000 Palestinian workers in Kuwait invited and were cooperating with the invasion of and celebrating the invasion of Saddam Hussein into Kuwait. So then they were expelled from there. Nobody wants them. It's a shame. The West isn't, West opened its gates to all sorts of refugees from Syria, from Africa, from all over the Middle East. They have not done that for the Palestinians, and maybe they got a good reason not to. Look what's going on in capitals and major cities all over Europe. These demonstrations in favor of killing Jews, in favor of massacres, and it's happening in the United States as well. Today, was yesterday or today, a Jew in Los Angeles was killed by a pro-Palestinian demonstrator. Come home, Jews. Come home to Israel. We want you. We need you. You'll be safer here than anywhere else in the world. You have a nation that will do everything to protect you, even when we fall asleep at the wheel, which we did and paid a heavy price for. We are like lions today, And we are fighting, like I said when I opened the show, for our dignity, for our lives, for our land, fighting for the honor of HaShem, and fighting for the future of the world, because the world needs Israel. The world needs the Holy Temple. The world needs to know what's right and what's wrong. And the world is really, really mixed up right now, really confused, really screwed up. We posted today some delightful news on our Facebook page. A group of, I don't know how many, but a group of cowboys from, I think it was Montana and Montana. I'm going to look up it in a second. Hold on just a moment. From Arkansas and Montana, arrived in Israel yesterday. These are cowboys. These are farmers, men who know, understand agriculture, understand livestock, because first of all, the agricultural communities around Gaza were devastated, and the people were either killed or had to move away because of the war, and livestock was killed. And there was just a video I saw today showing on that same day, October 7th, Palestinians marching thousands of Israeli-owned cows into Gaza. And even besides the area outside of Gaza, which is now farmland, which is being left untended to, all over Israel, men and women have been called up into the army. And fields need to be tended to, produce needs to be harvested, animals need to be tended to, cows need to be milked, and there are many volunteers here in Israel doing it. And these men, these wonderful people from Montana and Arkansas, have flew all the way to Israel in order to help out, and that is a big shot in the arm for us, not only because their help will be greatly appreciated, but the gesture is a huge gesture. And it's good to know that we have friends out there, and I know that we have a lot of friends out there. I know there are a lot of people also who are demonstrating and making strong show of support for Israel. And it's really, it's a, what do you call it, a binary situation. You're either for or against. You're either, for good, either support good or you support evil. I think that Hamas just laid it out there very plain for everybody. They're evil. There's no way that a thinking, intelligent person can change that into anything else, even though they've tried, and they're trying. And it either attests to their lack of intelligence or certainly their lack of integrity, lack of honesty. So, yes. And in this crazy world that we live, and in this crazy situation, the beautiful news is in Israel, babies are still being born, and young couples are still getting married. In fact, many soldiers, both men and women, have gotten married on the base. They had either they moved up their marriage or they had their big plans. They had to cancel them because they were called up, and rather than wait, they are getting married, and life goes on, and life continues, and that's the most important thing. Am Yisrael Chai, Israel lives. It's not just a statement, it is a fact. We are alive and kicking, and we have no intention of anything else. And nothing better speaks for the eternity of Israel than young people falling in love, getting married, and having children. And this week's parsha is, again, it's just has so much to say, so much to share about the current situation here in Israel. Parshat Chayei Sara, as I said before, it begins in Genesis chapter 23, verse 1, and concludes 25:18, and it opens with the death of Sarah Imenu, our matriarch Sarah, and her burial, and the purchase of the burial plot by Avraham from Ephron the Hittite in the city of Kiryat Arba, also known as Hebron. It's the Machpelah, the field and the cave of Machpelah. And of course, the field and cave, the burial place of Sarah, and later we'll learn at the end of this parsha, the end of this Torah reading, Avraham, and later on of Yitzchak and Rivkah, and also will be of Yaakov and Rachel, and Leah. Rachel is not buried, we know, in the Machpelah. And so our mothers and our fathers are all buried in the Machpelah cave in the city of Hebron, a city which, even though the Jewish population of Hebron is small in number, it is great in spirit and great in determination, and thousands and thousands and thousands, tens and hundreds of thousands of Jews visit the Machpelah every year. Usually every year for the past many, many years, there is a huge get-together, a huge gathering on Shabbat, Parshat Sarah. This is this coming Shabbat in Hebron. I'm sure the security situation this year will require some kind of limit, if not canceling it altogether. But and then from the burial of Sarah, we go right to Avraham's next concern, which is finding a helpmate, finding a mate for his son Yitzchak, Isaac. And for that, he sends out his faithful servant of many, many years. He's not given a name. He's not mentioned by name in this parsha, but we all understand it to be Eliezer, from Damascus, who is mentioned more than once in earlier verses and chapters and verses in Genesis. And he's been a faithful servant to Avraham all along. And in fact, before Yitzchak was born, Avraham even said to God, he said, I don't have a son, so maybe Eliezer should be my heir, my spiritual heir. And God said, no, you're going to have a son, don't worry. So you have Eliezer, who could have been, the heir of Avraham, but he wasn't. You might think he'd be bitter, you might think he would, be hurt by that, and resent having to be told by Avraham, having to be sworn to find a woman, a bride for Yitzchak among Avraham's family in Aram Naharaim. But no, he set out there and he basically set the conditions for what he was looking for. He basically talked to God the entire time on his way to find a bride. He said to God, this is what I'm looking for, and if a woman meets these requirements, she's the one. And so let's read the first few verses of Parashat Chayei Sara in Hebrew, and then we'll read it in English and continue from there. Again, chapter 23, verse 1. Vayihiu Chayei Sara me'a shana ve'esrim shana ve'sheva shanim shenei Chayei Sara. Vatamot Sara bekiryat arba hi Hebron be'eretz Canaan. Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sara v'livkota. Vayakom Avraham me'al pnei meto v'yedaber el bnei het lemor. Okay, Sarah's lifetime was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, the years of Sarah's life. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Avraham came to eulogize Sarah and to weep for her. Avraham rose up from the presence of his dead and spoke to the children of Het, saying, I am an alien and a resident among you. Grant me an estate for a burial site with you, that I may bury my dead from before me. Again, this is really the first time we've been told, ever since Adam and Eve, we're told that, a person was born, they had children, and they died. But this is the first time that any focus is given to what happens after a person dies, burying, a eulogy, Avraham weeping, mourning his wife, and burying her in a proper burial place. And so this is where the Jewish tradition of burying our dead begins, right here. And it comes immediately in the aftermath of the Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak, which took place in the very conclusion of last week's Torah reading, Vayera. And so there are midrashim that says that Sarah was told by the Satan, the Satan, came to her and told her that your crazy husband just took your son and killed him, and that caused a shock and killed her. That is a midrash which explains why we read about her death right after the story of the Akedah. Be that as it may, she has lived 127 years and has now left the world, and Avraham purchases the Machpelah cave and field from Ephron. Ephron, he said, I'll give it to you for free. You're a man of God, and I'll give it to you for free. And Avraham insisted on paying him. The price was 400 shekel, and this was Israel's first land purchase in the land of Canaan, which would become Israel. The first of 3 land purchases which are each recorded specifically in the Torah. The second is also in the book of Genesis, and that's when Yaakov will purchase a field in Shechem, also known today as Nablus, which will become the eventual place of the Kever Yosef, of the tomb of Joseph. But it's mentioned again also there, the price that he paid for it. And of course the third place, which is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses, but it's mentioned in the book of Samuel, and that is King David's purchase of the threshing floor of Aravna, the Jebusite on Mount Moriah, the place where, of course, would become the place of the Holy Temple. So these 3 extremely important places were indisputably purchased in ancient times by Avraham, Yaakov, and David, and they, by any logic, they should be places of absolutely no dispute of the Jewish ownership. And yet, of course, we know that these places are the places where, again, our enemies will claim that we don't own it. But we have the paperwork right here proving it. Now, the story of Eliezer and his search for a bride for Yitzchak. So he goes out, he takes some jewelry, some fine clothing, women's clothing. He has a bunch of people that accompany him. He goes with a bunch of camels, and they make their way for Aram Naharaim, where Avraham's family lives. And along the way he says, okay, when I get to near my destination and I rest at a well, at a watering place for livestock and people, if I see a young woman, I will ask her if she can give me some water to drink. And if she says yes, I will give you water to drink, and I will also bring water for your camels. I'll know that she's the one, because I'll know that from that gesture of generosity, of concern, of loving kindness, chesed, right? Chesed, loving kindness, the midah, the attribute that so characterized Avraham and all he did. Eliezer knew that that's what was needed for Avraham's son, and so he basically shared this idea with HaShem. And again, we see, I just don't have time to go into it, our show is almost over, but we see from his conversation with himself and with HaShem, and how many times he bows down to HaShem, that he was a student of Avraham. Avraham taught him all this. He was a man of faith in HaShem, Eliezer, because Avraham taught him. And we see what a wonderful teacher Avraham was by Eliezer's behavior. He is just in constant dialogue, conversation, constant communion with HaShem all along the way. And when this young woman, beautiful woman we are told, comes along and says, here's water for you and here's water for your camels, he knows immediately she's the one. He bows down to Hashem. He immediately places some jewelry on her, and says, and she says, do you need a place to sleep? We've got place. We have space for you and your camels. And that was it. So what's very interesting also is that the story of these set of conditions that Eliezer himself created, this is going to show me that this is the person he mentions first to Hashem, and then when he gets to the household of Rivkah and her brother Lavan and her mother and father, and they want to feed him. They sit him down for a meal, and he says, before I eat, I need to tell you the story, and I need an answer whether Rivkah is going to come with me or not. And he tells the whole story again. So we hear him describe the scenario that he's waiting for. We actually read the actual incident itself, which is almost verbatim of what he was describing. And then we hear him tell a story. So we actually hear the story 3 times. And even after he brings Rivkah back to Yitzchak, we're told at the very conclusion of the whole saga that he told Yitzchak the story. Now, what I find interesting and very beautiful in a way, in fact, the whole conclusion of the story is just so breathtaking. Let's read it. So Rivkah agrees to go with Eliezer. And I'm picking up from here, and then she said, I will go. I'm picking up, we're in chapter 24, it's verse 59. So they escorted Rivkah, their sister, and her nurse, as well as Avraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rivkah and said to her, O sister, may you come to be thousands of myriads. May your offspring inherit the gate of its foes. Then Rivkah arose with her maidens. They rode upon camels and proceeded after the man. The servant took Rivkah and went. Now Yitzchak came from having gone to Be'er Lachairoi, for he dwelt in the south country. Yitzchak went out to supplicate in the field towards evening, and he raised his eyes and saw, and behold, camels were coming. And Rivkah raised her eyes and saw Yitzchak. She inclined while upon the camel, and she said to the servant, Who is that man walking in the field towards us? And the servant said, He is my master. So she then took the veil and covered herself. The servant told Yitzchak all the things he had done, and Yitzchak brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. He married Rivkah, and she became his wife, and he loved her, and thus was Yitzchak consoled after his mother. So I read it very quickly, and it's just almost like, it could be like director's notes for the most beautiful romantic love scene in a movie ever. She's coming in from a distance. He sees her, she sees him. Who is that man? She gets off, she covers herself. And then, like I said a moment ago, it says that Eliezer told Yitzchak the whole story of how he came upon Rivkah. But of course, this time we're spared the details. It just mentioned that he told him, and I like to believe that Eliezer, or the Torah itself, is suggesting to us that Yitzchak and Rivkah had more important things to do right now than to hear this story. That can wait. This is their wedding night, and they've got what to do. Here's the music, perfect timing. A beautiful love story. Again, a story of a new beginning, and even the most difficult of times, as Israel's going through now, there are new beginnings all the time, and that's the beauty of the world, that's the beauty of Hashem, and that's God's blessing. Thank you very much for being with me. Temple Talk.